Yo, what's going on, folks? Welcome. Welcome to the live. I see some, when I say old faces, I don't mean to insult anyone, but I see a good old face. Michael Apple is in the chat. What's going on? And thank you so much, Pragmatic Crystal, for all that you do. And everybody else who's just now chiming in, eyes opening, heart realigning. Wow, what a name. What a name. Yes, indeed. Accidentally agnostic. That sounds like a story to tell. What's happening? But today is going to be some fun. Once I get to the end of this book project that I'm working on, I plan to be doing a lot more just popping up, pop out and show folks, hopping online and having some discussions. One of the things that I'm really going to do is all those long posts that I'll be putting on Facebook and trying to start trouble over there. I will be turning those into just little video conversations that we can have. So yes. What's happening, y'all? Let me know. Do I sound all right? How's my mic? Is my mic nice? I'm trying to get some things straight here. In the near future, I will be trying to settle on one of these platforms, either Riverside, StreamYard, or Zoom. The only thing I don't like about Zoom is on Zoom, either you can't do it or I've not found a way to take when you guys super chat to pin those to the actual live screen. You can see them in the chat. I can pin them to the top of the chat, but I can't pin them to the actual video in Zoom. I can do it on StreamYard. I can do it on Riverside. But yeah, anyhow, that's the only thing I don't like about Zoom. Everything else with Zoom has been pretty good. Well, with no further delay, Thurgood, what's happening? Thurgood, you're not even diamond level at this point. Jay Witt put you on the diamond level. Now they're good. You're on some. You're kind of on the universal level. You have universal rights. You have all access universal rights. So anyhow, I'm looking forward to this episode today. I'm going to bring Tim Mills in. Oh no, Tim Mills was backstage and now he's back. Okay, so I'll give Tim a minute to get set up where he is. Nah, man, never that. Just happy to help the cause. Thurgood, appreciate you, fam. Truly. Just so you guys know, I am, like I said in last night's stream, headed to St. Louis this coming Monday. I've been buying equipment, extra lights and extra mics and boom stands, so I can get down there. And we're going to have a great time. All right, I'm going to bring into the studio Tim Mills from Harmonic Atheist. Everybody, welcome Tim Mills to the live.
Hey,
what's happening,
great to
Tim?
be here. I'm blessed and highly favored to be with you, man.
That's what's up. So, Tim, I hit you up the other day because you did 2 amazing episodes this week. One of them was how Christianity, I think it was exploits our hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And then the other one was how Christianity robs us of our personality. Both of them, excellent videos. At the end of the Maslow's hierarchy one, you actually beat me to it because I have a line in one of my most famous songs. The line from the song says, Maslow's hierarchy lists the priority of the order of the things that we need, and I guess it varies from the need to feed and to find love and to seek to succeed, but he missed the one thing that's necessary. And I start walking through the hierarchy trying to get to the need for God. But the way you broke it down was so beautiful. I almost don't even need to do the episode I was going to do. I said all that to say at the end of that episode, what you said was so, I almost hesitate to use this word, but a Christian used this word with me yesterday and it made me think, oh, maybe I still can use it. What you did at the end of that episode was so pastoral. I don't even know if you know that. Did it come across to you at, maybe you just think of it as life coaching or just humanism, but it felt pastoral. But what do you see yourself doing with those kinds of videos? Can't hear you.
Okay, how about now? Am I coming through okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. There is, I mean, number one, of course, I did study to be a pastor, so I'm not surprised. And I know you went down some of those routes too. I think a lot of it's just this passion that comes out where we're just like, we start to understand the psychology of it all. And I think we're going to probably get into some of that with what we're going to do with Philip Goth's conversion, in quotes.
Yeah.
But you realize the manipulation, you realize just the ways that we were psychologically given all these constructs without realizing it. And once you kind of pull that curtain back, there's just this passion in you that comes out. You're just like, I am not going to get tricked again, and I'm going to help other people escape. And you can't help it. It's just whether it's pastoral or whether it's just a passion of life. You're like, I have a new vision. I have a vision, and I do have a mission. I am a man on a mission, and it is to free minds. We're here to free minds. So
yeah. People always ask me, I hate this, but I like it because it sort of gives me a platform if I don't get too triggered by it. If I didn't believe in something, I don't know why I would spend so much time talking about it. But like you said, it's the human to human. I care. It's the empathy. I would want someone to help me the way that I'm helping other people. If I didn't know that this religion was not true and someone else did, I wouldn't want them to keep it to themselves. I would want them to tell me as often and as articulately and as passionately as they could.
Yeah. I think too, when you realize that this is a form of psychological abuse, and we were stuck in propaganda, hardcore propaganda, and I've been saying in the last week or two, like, you're realizing something was done to you. This wasn't just like something you participated in and you remember. Something was aggressively done to you. It was in many cases done on purpose. And when you realize that, you're like, all right, I gotta figure this out. I'm not going to play the victim card forever, but I was in fact a victim of a system and of people and of toxicity. And once you realize it, the angry atheist phase is not just a phase. Like, there's a party that says this is really, really bad, and I need to take my life back and reclaim my identity. And I think a lot of people are it's not obviously my message. A lot of people have been saying that forever, but I think a lot of people are just waking up. I mean, we're really waking up to the fact of what's been going on and saying it's time to change ourselves. It's time to change our culture.
You're a big part of a lot of people waking up, because the people who are having questions and doubts, they feel like it's just them. Then they stumble across a channel like yours and they see tons and tons of people telling their story, and they realize, one, it's not just me. Two, it's okay to ask these questions. And I think what you're doing, you're a part of that great awakening. Like, you're a huge part of that great awakening.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it. And honestly, I can't answer the emails fast enough for people that want to tell their stories.
Wow. But it's listen to that, y'all. Listen to what he just said. There are other people who want to tell their same, different, but same story. That should be encouraging.
I mean, if I stopped trying to get new people on, if I just answered the people that have already said, hey, I'm up for it, let's do it, it'd probably be at least 6 months before I could catch up. Just the people that have said, let's do it already. And I'm actively looking for people too. I kind of have my own.
How often are you doing the interviews?
At the moment, I'm doing maybe 3 a week. I'm a bit backed up. So what you see come out of my channel currently is probably like one average, 2 to 4 weeks old, because you're just trying to catch up. It's a good problem to have, but there's so many people that want to share their stories. And what's cool about it, I think, is that we all want our story to be the one that resonates, but the reality is that it's not going to happen. But you get enough people in the diversity, I'd love people to be like, wow, Tim's story is the be all and end all, but it's not going to be. Right. You get somebody that's from a black church, you get someone that's a homeschooling mom of 6 kids. They're going to impact other people that are from their background more. Someone that's Pentecostal, I wasn't Pentecostal, or JW. You get enough people together and somebody's going to say, I like listening to the stories. And maybe Tim's got something good to say from time to time, but like that person specifically, or that one nailed it. Like that one's, I connect with them, and I love that. That's so powerful.
Well, I'm about to start doing more solo stuff on my channel, but for a long time, I hid myself in my deconverted friends and other people in life after faith stories, because I did not want it to be centered on me. I didn't want people to think, so wait, if I unbelieve, I have to end up like Brady. I have to do it. I wanted to just be one voice among many voices. And now that I've sort of helped to tell that story, that it's not just me, now I will begin to speak out and do more solo stuff. And I see you actually are doing more solo stuff as well. What's the heart behind that?
I think the heart for me behind it was just a really strong, ever deepening sense that this is about psychology. And as I've begun to understand more about psychology, and I'm not in any way, on any level, ever pretending to be a psychologist or a counselor or a therapist. People really need real therapists, hopefully secular. And, you really need to go to some of those people sometimes. And I'm not a replacement for those, of course, and neither are you. But at the same time, we can acknowledge that there are psychological dynamics that have been at play, and we can talk about them. And I think for me, realizing that that's what's been happening here, and that we're not going to heal unless we unpack not just what we believed, but why we believed it. And the whole idea, like we talked about, I think on one of our interviews, either yours to mine or mine to yours, the idea of saying Yahweh is a psychopath, and yet we called him a good father. Why was I in love with my captor? Why did I think he was so good? And why did I think the Bible was such a wonderful story, a love letter, as it were? And it's like you realize that, sort of in the one I talked about, the personality topic the other day, it's like you become both the prisoner. You're imprisoned by this worldview, but you become your own prison guard, because you learn to love it. You're the prisoner, and you're the guard. And so realizing that that's what's going on to me, and that we can't heal unless we pull apart the psychology of this sucker. We're never going to really heal. It's not enough to just say Christianity's mythology. You got to say, why did you why did you think this was a good story? Because I think it arguably deprives you of your humanity. We would talk a lot about how when you believe monstrous things long enough, it makes you into a monster. Like, why did this thing make us into monsters? I mean, you look at like even the Trumpism stuff, like how can Christians go and say like Trump is this wonderful guy and we love what he stands for? And don't worry, y'all, this isn't a political thing. We're not going to politics today, but but you can look at Christians who were otherwise evangelicals who would have said, oh my goodness, Bill Clinton and Monica, horrible stuff. Character counts. And then within like one or two elections, like character doesn't count anymore. You're like, okay, there's more going on here than meets the eye. There's other psychological stuff at play.
Excellent. I love what you said at the end of so the book that I wrote, Let There Be Gaslight, the very last page of the epilogue, I talk about Friedrich Nietzsche and his talking about God is dead. And he talks about for us to take over that role that God played, to give ourselves a moral code and all that. He says we almost have to become gods to be worthy of the task of killing God and taking his place. And I say at the end of my book, no, embracing this idea of the responsibility to be, to chart the course for our own life, for our own world, for our own morality and all that. It's not our deification that's on hold if we don't do that. It's our full humanity that's on hold. So no, I know what Nietzsche was saying. It was the madman's speech where he says we almost have to become gods to seem worthy of the task. But no, it's not we're trying to become God. Our task is to become full humanity. And that's what we're doing.
I love it. I love too thinking of ourselves as culture changers, and to say that we joke about that sense of the astrotheology stuff about we're entering the age of Aquarius in that song. But it's like we might not be entering the age of Aquarius in a sense that matters to us, but we are actually entering a new phase of humanity, in my opinion. And I think there's a lot of people that are trying to pull us back to the Stone Ages, as it were, to the Bronze Age, with this, Project 2025 and the white Christian nationalism garbage. And it's like, this is a real culture war, and we have to be in the fight. And I know not everybody can be in the fight. Some people have really good reasons to just hold off. But when you can get in the fight, I think it's important, because we need to free minds. And honestly, there's a lot at stake here. And it's like the Book of Esther. We're here for such a time as this. And I'm going to speak loud and proud, because if this country and our world goes back to a mythologically focused perspective, the people with the nuclear codes believing in Mother Mary and God and the Holy Spirit, it's like we're in, this is a bad spot for us, and we need to move quickly
Yeah.
past the stuff. So I'm really hoping that we can make a
Well,
difference. I know we're
in
small
light of
fish in a
that,
big pond, but
no, in light of that, so my dad's in Tampa. I just talked to him. He just got back home today because he went to his brother's, which was a few miles inland. And he talked about his brother's, I think his brother's house is about 20 minutes from his. It took him over an hour to get home back to his house today because all the power is out. So you got people driving, and he says a lot of people out here don't know that when these lights are out, you treat these intersections like four-way stop signs. And so everybody's creeping through trying to get to where they're going. It took over an hour to get home. And I made a comment. I said, man, it's almost like you guys went back in time, like you're back in the Stone Age. Now, of course, they didn't have cars in the Stone Age, but just imagine having to go back to a time before the things that you know now. And that's sort of, what it's like to be enlightened, to realize you were living your life according to a book of myths, to people's revisionist history, to all sorts of cultural consolation that people were giving themselves, maybe even some social engineering and social manipulation. And here you are 2,000 years later, still living your life according to that. You get free from that. You're a free thinker. You're independent. You're going back would be like going back to a time before stoplights, to a time before cell phones, to a time before going back in time. But what's interesting is we're about to watch this video. This is someone who was an atheist and a philosopher who is sort of going back in time. He's going back to a way of thinking, and maybe not even going back, because I think what we're going to see is he sort of was always in a space that he had a space for this. And on my podcast, me and my guy Jay Witt, we talk about people still have some kind of superstitious thinking, so they haven't really unpacked all of their worldview. They've got a space, a placeholder for an unknown God. And maybe that was part of what led to this, but I'll set it up this way. Cameron Bertucci of Capturing Christianity often has theists and non-theists on to discuss their views. He posted a video, sort of a teaser, maybe not even a video. I think it was just a post on YouTube teasing, hey, a popular atheist philosopher has just converted to Christianity. Can you guess which one? And I think he knew when he posted that, rather than trying to guess which one, what he was doing was kindling a fire, lighting a flame for the people who were wanting to say, we got all these deconversion stories. We got Tim Mills interviewing all these people. We got Myth Vision. We got all these people falling away from the faith. Is anybody coming to the faith? So you come on, you say, hey, a popular atheist philosopher. So you got three things that just lit up somebody's, the center of somebody's brain. He's popular. So there's an argument of ad populum. So this person is popular. He's an atheist. Oh, he used to be an enemy. That's a good story to tell. And he's a philosopher. So maybe we can appeal to his authority as a philosopher. And he just became one of us. Yeah, score one for us. It doesn't matter who he is. Somebody became one of what we believe is not crazy, because one of them became one of us.
Yeah, and
when I saw that,
when you look at the video too, you kind of have to think to yourself, this isn't the win that they thought it was. Like, if I was a Christian, that video was not a win.
Well, I was going to say that was the setup, because he got you thinking, yay, one of us, he became one of us. So then when you go to watch it and you see what's actually happened, it's like, this isn't really the win that we thought it was going to be, Cameron. And I think even Cameron knows that. But then at some point, I think you have to decide, well, how do we count this? Do we count this as a win, or do we discount this? I think Derek from Myth Vision, he even made a post because there were some Christians trying to gatekeep and say, no, that's not a real testimony. He's not one of us. And Derek was like, see, this is why I would never go back, because you guys can't even figure out what it takes to be in. Anyway, that being said, we're going to dive into this video. I'm very curious to know from you, would the Christian you have embraced this testimony? And if not, why not? What parts of it might you have embraced? Would you have said, he's not in yet, he's on the way to being in? would you have said Satan has deceived him? He's not even close to the kingdom.
Did you want me to answer now or after you play some?
Let's play some so that people know what we're talking about.
Sounds good.
So this is Philip Goff. Is that how you say his last name? Philip Goff? Goff?
I think Goff, yeah.
Okay, well, Adam, and then I did a sound test earlier, and they were saying the audio was playing a bit behind the video, so hopefully it won't be too distracting. But let's add him and see.
You've got a big announcement for us today, don't you?
Oh, he just went right in. All right, so this is Cameron Bertucci interviewing Philip Goff, and let's see how it goes. I'm not frozen, but this is.
The Holy Spirit's keeping us from making a statement here. You got to get more demon power in there to offset it, man.
Come on, play.
Help set us up for what people can expect if they watch this entire video. Like what sort of topics are we going to get into today?
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. It has indeed been quite a journey and something I've been thinking about for a long time.
Sorry, what I've experienced with StreamYard sometimes is it takes a while for it to like catch on to what it's trying to do, and once it catches on, then it'll play it like without issue. But right now it's starting. So let's see.
I never thought a few years ago I'd end up a Christian, but as you say, what I've ended up with is maybe quite an unusual form of Christianity. I don't believe in the virgin birth. I don't believe in an all-powerful God. I think the Bible is wrong about a lot of stuff, and I'm very uncertain.
All right, so I'm taking it back because it seems like it's going to give us what we want, but it's taking us time to do it. Please
I don't believe in the virgin birth. I don't believe in an all-powerful God. I think the Bible is wrong about a lot of stuff, and I'm very uncertain whether it's all true. So in a way, it hasn't, in one sense at least, it hasn't been that radical a shift. What's basically happened is after a long time of very wide reading and many conversations with lots of different kinds of Christian thinkers, I've discovered a form of Christianity that makes intellectual sense to me, and also that really deeply resonates. So that might sound a bit weird. How can that be Christianity? But maybe if we dig deep, we can start to make a bit more sense of this.
Yeah, so most people will actually be more familiar with you.
All right. I'm just going to stop him right there. Just in hearing, like when it first came on, right from the gate, he said, I don't believe in an all-powerful God. Don't believe in a virgin birth. The Bible's got a lot of things wrong with it. As a Christian, think back, the Christian Tim, would you have written this guy off right away, or would you have listened further? Like, what would your thoughts have been?
Yeah, I mean, as a Christian, I would have written him off immediately. I would have said that is absolute garbage. I would have said the idea that he's calling himself a Christian is really self-deception on the grandest level, because I mean, if you're open to admitting all that stuff, to saying it's probably not a virgin birth, there's probably mistakes in the Bible, you're basically saying you're opening the door up a little bit, at least, opening so that some light can get through, saying there's some mistakes here. Once you admit that, and maybe admittedly there's some mythology or there's some legend, once you admit that, it's like, well, where does it end? How do you know for sure? And he goes on to talk about certain scholars that do that. They do exactly say that the resurrection appearances and the all these other the visions that these people had as early Christians, when they said, I saw Jesus, I saw him rise up in the air. There are theologians, in quotes, that say this is all made up. This is all visions that they had. They were perhaps actually doing visions, or perhaps making it up, who knows. But there are people that call themselves Christians in some sense, but it's more cultural Christianity perhaps, but they're opening that door. And I've always thought those people even now, I'm like, once you open it up a little bit, why not open it up some more? Like, if it's going to be 25% mythology, why not say 40% and 50%? You at some point you have to say this could go anywhere. You've opened up Pandora's box. This guy, if you listen to the whole thing, and I have listened to it all, he goes on to get much deeper. I mean, I think at one point he says something like, I'm going to pull a number out of the air, and I'm going to say, I think Christianity has a chance of being like 30% correct. I'm like, it has a chance of being 30% correct. And then he goes on to say, well, if you were, say someone you love was in the hospital and they were, in danger of not being able to make it, but the doctor says, well, they've got a 30% chance of making it. You'd be like, well, I'm going to cling to that hope that 30% is real. I'm like, wow, like you are mixing stuff up in so many ways. Having hope of a legitimate scientific doctor that says 30% of people do in fact make it, and there is really good medicines, we can possibly save so and so, and the story's not over yet. Versus, he says, well, versus if the doctor says you got 1% chance of surviving this, like a scientific doctor that's got medicine behind him is very different from looking at a Bronze Age book like this, where we don't know where it came from, who's changed it. Like there's no comparison. He's hanging his hat on something that's so flimsy. I mean, honestly, if I had been a Christian watching this, I would have been appalled. But I will just say, just for context, Cameron, I don't watch him too much. Honestly, his stuff, it just seems so weird to me. It seems like his show is more about showmanship and grandstanding and clickbaity stuff. I'm looking for real content. I'm looking for people that can address the hardcore issues. And this guy doesn't. He stays real surfacey the whole time. And he kind of gets a bunch of softball questions. Let's get him in the room with us, and let's ask him some hard questions. And I can get into those in a little bit. I don't want to take the whole stage here, but there's some much harder questions.
Yeah, you almost sound like you almost sound like Richard Dawkins when his friend was it Ayana Hirsi Ali, when she converted to Christianity after being an atheist for so long. And when they got on stage together, he started asking her the hard questions, like, okay, you say you're part of this religion, but are you trying to tell me you really believe in? And he starts naming things, and she kind of dances around some of those things as, well, what if I believe it this way or that way? And Philip Goff here, I think he's going to try to put himself in a progressive, like, you can find some progressive Christians who might say some of the things that he's saying, but he's going to say some things that I don't even think the progressives would say. But it's actually interesting because it's almost like, as a Christian, I probably would not have said what he's saying. But now that I know the problems with biblical faith, if I was going to try to stake out a place in Christianity, I might have to say some of the things that he's saying. And this is why, to me, I think this is not the win Christians were hoping for, because I think what he's going to end up saying here, even though it's still not believable for me, this is sort of what you would have to believe if you were going to accept a Bible today. You would have to believe something like what he's saying. So as wrong as the Christian would think he is, he actually is probably their race, and they don't even know it.
Yeah, but I mean, it really does. Going back to that Pandora's box illustration, it really does leave it open to almost anybody could be a Christian by his definition. I mean, I could be a Christian because you could say, Tim, do you like Christmas? And do you like Christmas trees? Sure. Do you think Sunday's a good day to kind of take a break a little bit and try to rest? Well, yeah, sure. Kind of mentally, it's just been my culture for my whole life. So yeah, I kind of think of Sunday as a typically more restful day. Okay, well, you like Christmas and Sunday's kind of a day of rest to you. I guess you're a Christian. Like, no, there might be some cultural aspects to it that I still keep in some ways, but I'm not a Christian. And he's really he pulls apart so much. And
there's one thing he's going to do.
Good.
I was going to say there's one thing he's going to do that is going to give him something of a leg to stand on, because even though he will deny the virgin birth and some other things, some key things, which we'll see in a second, what he is going to accept is Jesus as the way that God and humanity can have union. And when we get to it, I'm going to ask you, does that buy him some stake in the Christian project? Even if he denies some of the other things, what does that do?
Yeah, well, just to set a context too for that, I think what he is doing is, you could really label it more of creating an esoteric or Gnostic Christianity. He is absolutely doing that. Like, I remember when I was still a Christian, I remember getting exposed to some of the old sort of Gnostic monks, like the Roman Catholic monks. I was very much into the music by John Michael Talbot, who's a monk, and he has beautiful music, and of course, from a Christian perspective. But he at one point took some poetry that was written by much more ancient monks, and you listen to it, and some of it, for example, is very erotic, where he's talking about like putting himself in the mindset of a woman that walks on a beach and finds her lover, and they go make love in a cave. And the whole thing is very erotic and sensual. And the whole thing is a picture of the church's relationship with Christ and of our relationship individually with Jesus. And these monks, some of them, these celibate monks, they went
Song of Solomon.
Deep. Yeah, Song of Solomon. I mean, they went neck deep into they're literally giving erotic conversation, but the whole thing is about your relationship with Jesus. He's kind of moving in that direction a little bit, where he kind of is like, I want to be one with Jesus. But the thing is, he also doesn't, he doesn't, the thing he doesn't address is where this whole goddamn thing came from. He never ever talks about he never talks about the origin of Yahweh, the origin of the Gospels, why we're looking at these 4 Gospels versus the other 50 to 60 versus probably the hundreds that were written originally. He never talks one bit about where any of it came from. He just assumes that the package it came in is the package he has to grapple with. That doesn't make sense. He doesn't talk about comparative mythology at all. It's really crazy. I mean, he starts at step 100 as opposed to step 1.
All right, let's
you gotta ask yourself, where did this thing come from? They don't touch on that at all.
All right, let's let him cook a little bit here.
With your work on consciousness and how it relates to reality, we don't have to get into too many details. Just maybe give us a sense of the journey that led you here. Where did it sort of begin for you?
I think this started 6 years ago, actually, when I was asked to teach philosophy of religion. As you said, I've normally done philosophy of mind before. So this is when I came from university in the UK, my current university. And so they asked me to teach a fairly standard philosophy of religion course. You teach the arguments against God, you teach the arguments for God, then the students make up their mind which they find more compelling and write their essay. Right, so I started with the classic argument against the existence of God, the challenge of reconciling a loving, all-powerful God with the terrible suffering we find in the world. And I thought to myself, yeah, very convincing. Definitely no God, job done. But then it came to the arguments for the existence of God, and I found myself thinking, actually, these are quite compelling as well. Particularly the argument from the fine-tuning of physics for life, this discovery of recent decades that many of the numbers in physics are against incredible odds, just right for the possibility of life. So I was finding both sides compelling. And this left me with quite some difficulty, right? Because I kind of live out my philosophy. These aren't abstract intellectual puzzles for me. If I don't know what I think on some philosophical matter, I literally can't sleep, So I was really wrestling with this for quite some time. And at some point, I just had a real eureka moment. I'd been assuming these arguments pushed in opposite directions, so you had to work out which you agreed with. But actually, I don't think they do. The classic argument against God is arguing against a very particular form of God, what we call the omni-God, all-knowing, all-powerful, perfectly good. But the arguments for God, or at least the fine-tuning argument for God, is arguing for something much, much more generic, something God-ish, just some kind of purpose or goal-directedness in the early universe. So I realized if you go for something God-ish, but you don't go for the omni-God, then you can sort of have your cake and eat it. And then this eventually turned into the book I published last year, modestly titled Why? The Purpose of the Universe. And that was essentially saying, look, we've had this never-ending debate between traditional atheists and traditional theists. but they both have something right, they both have something wrong, and there's this middle ground option we can explore here. So that was the kind of gateway drug. And a year later, I've ended up in this weird position of being a kind of mildly heretical Christian, as we'll get into.
Yeah, so you had two sides of the argument. You had atheism on the one hand, and then you had the sort of omni-God, the traditional concept of God as this perfect being, omnipotent, omniscient, and everything.
Yeah,
and
I'm trying to pause it.
Thought that those were the only really two options on the table. And so a lot of people, I think, in your position, I know them personally, would conclude...
I can't even control it. I'm trying to pause it and it won't even pause. So yeah, he said, I ended up being this sort of mildly heretical Christian because he was trying to do the thing that, would you at least give him credit for it? What he was trying to do was reconcile two extremes. You've got this omni-God on one side, who, you know, is responsible for the fine-tuning of the universe, and he's all good and all powerful and all these. On the other side, you've got the problem of evil. You've got and so he says, rather than trying to choose between these two, he came to a third way. And this third way is, no, maybe there is a God. Maybe he is powerful, but not all powerful. Maybe he's, and I don't even think he's saying God's not all good. Maybe God is all good. He's just not powerful enough to pull off all the good that he would want to do. And so he says, if I settle there, I get to have my cake and eat it too. I get a God, even a God who's worthy of worship, because he may not be all powerful, but he's at least powerful enough to create this reality. And in this reality, we don't have all good because God just couldn't do it all like that. Yeah. Would that not be acceptable?
I mean, it wouldn't have been to me as a Christian. But I mean, I think that the thing is, it misses. This is one of those interviews that Cameron did with this gentleman. I think this a lot about the rare times that I see Cameron. I don't watch them much again. It more pisses me off that they seem to not go very deep, and it seems like a lot of softball questions. But you know, they're basically not taking a deep dive into almost anything that needs to be addressed. I mean, even the definition, like when he says, "I believe in a God, but I don't think he's all powerful." Like, well, let's start with the word God. How do you know? You keep on using the word God and he. How do you know it's a he? How do you know it's not more than one God? And now that you are saying God's not powerful, well, that almost sounds more like polytheism, because you could have gods where you've got a God that does want to help you, he does want to cure childhood cancer, but he can't because there's an evil God too fighting him. That sounds more like a polytheistic worldview. And he's basically he's trying to do like a theological bait and switch. He's wrapping himself up in this language of faith, but he's holding himself back from actually committing to it. And, you know, I have to ask, like, what would be the end game of all that? Why would he, why would you seek refuge in the faith of your childhood, which is probably what's partly going on here? But, you know, in reality, it seems like he's more indulging in some kind of philosophical experiment to see how much he can bend Christianity before it breaks. I mean, it's like he's putting this square peg in a round hole. He's trying to justify a longing for something bigger, something that feels sacred. Yeah. But, you know, when you look at Christianity and Judaism, they're rotten to the core. I mean, how do you do this? The cognitive dissonance where he's believing in a God that's strong enough to create the whole universe, but weak enough to fail at preventing childhood cancer. I mean, it's like, well, you know, you can default to those crazy things we all say, God's ways are higher than our ways. But this is, again, to me, it's all psychology. This is psychological sleight of hand. He's proposing a solution that maintains the illusion of faith, but it empties it of all of the power that it should have. It's like, you know, I think fundamentalist churches do this a lot. They convince the congregation that doubt is you know, is a bad thing, but it becomes good if you bring it back to God in the end. And it's like a form of intellectual gaslighting. He's framing belief as a matter of rational thought, as if this rationality somehow transforms the essence of Christianity into something noble and worthy of acceptance. But again, it's like a intellectual gaslighting. He's making the irrational appear reasonable, as if by some sheer force of argument or because he's a philosopher like you started with. But he's not acknowledging that there are deeper manipulations at play, and fundamentally there is mythology at play through all of this. They don't even touch on it. He is just I mean, I think for those of us like you and me, where we've been down this road, there's no magic in these words. This is just, he's got this lingering aftertaste for a theology that has failed us all, and he wants to kind of say, no, it hasn't quite failed you. You're just kind of, you need a softer, gentler Jesus. But I mean, he goes on to just gut the essence of Christianity. He talks about even, blood atonement isn't really a thing. It's just, to me, that when he was a Christian, it was bullshit.
Let's get to that point. All right, let's try to speed him along here. Sorry, every time I start it up again, it's going to get wonky until it catches itself and plays at a normal speed. So I apologize for that.
Something like more along the lines of agnosticism. Like, let me just because there's arguments for both sides, let me just remain agnostic and just not really make a decision either way. But in your case, you've thought, well, actually, are those the only two options on the table? There's got to be some other third way. And so tell us more about this third way. How does this God that you've arrived at, if you even want to call it God, what do you think this being is like?
Yeah, it's good to ask about agnosticism. I have a lot of conversations with my friend and colleague Jack Symes, we have a very...
I paused him real quick just to say, the fact that Cameron can ask that question sort of says to me, okay, so you kind of gaslighted us with this philosopher became a Christian, because what Christian would you ever ask the question, if you want to call this thing you've come to God? You would never say that to somebody who holds the same faith as you. So the fact that you can even ask that question, you probably should not have marketed this as this guy became one of us.
Yeah, and I think he does use the word progressive Christian, I think, in the title. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is. But you know what's great about this? This is where I think these kind of things are a win for us. I don't find much value in like debating Christians, because it's like they're so stuck in their ways, and they can't see beyond the nose in their face. But when you look at a channel like that, when you look at Capturing Christianity and Cameron's work, and you look at interviews like this, this is where it's a win for us. These people are talking themselves into a corner. They're talking themselves into a pit. The more that they talk, the stupider their arguments sound. And I'm just like, keep talking. Let the people that are on the fence watch your channel. And while you think you're driving them to Christianity, you're driving them out, because you're like, this is another version of bullshit. This does not attract me to Christianity. This makes me think it's just a free for all. And again, it's like if being a Christian means whatever you want it to be, then it actually means nothing at all.
Right. This is what I have to do to make it acceptable. It's almost like the person that says, hey, I want to get this medicine into my dog, or into my, I want my child to take his vitamins, but he won't take it just the way it is. So I'm going to put so much sugar and so much, sweetening, and by the time he takes it, it's not medicine at all anymore. It's the sweetening you had to add into it to make it it's like me with coffee. I remember one time I was dating a woman, and I wanted her to watch Walking Dead, and she wanted me to try coffee because I was a Walking Dead fan. She was a coffee fan. So we watched one episode of Walking Dead. She was not feeling the zombies. I said, all right, time for the coffee. So she made me a cup of coffee. By the time she finished putting the cream and the sugar and whatever else she put into it to make it tolerable for me, it was not coffee anymore. And like you said, to the person who's on the fence watching this, if this is what you've got to do to the Christian faith to make it acceptable to someone who's trying to reason their way through it, like, that don't make sense to me. This is what you got to do, then this is not a faith worth holding. And so we're going to begin seeing the things that he had to do to make it acceptable for himself.
Very similar starting point, that there's something right about both sides of this debate that leads him to agnosticism. My position is there is a position, I think, a middle way position that accounts for all the data, and that is the hypothesis of a God.
Okay. So that's the only limitation that you would include. Is that, do I have that correct?
Yeah, a good a good God of limited power.
Okay.
I think is
But
the position.
unlimited in goodness, unlimited in knowledge as well.
Yeah. So some people say, "Oh, why not an all-powerful God?"
Right.
I think that leads to the mirror image of the problem of evil, right? The problem of good, right? If our world has an evil creator, why all the good things? Flowers and smile of a baby and love and so on. And Stephen Law has, explored this very well with the evil God challenge. The God all-knowing but not all-powerful can perhaps explain the data. So I mean, like one way of putting the challenge of the problem of evil is, why would a good God who can do anything choose to create life through the gruesome process of evolution by natural selection, right? But if God is not all-powerful,
gosh, I can't take this.
Maybe the only way God can create intelligent life is by creating a world, a universe with the right physics that will eventually evolve intelligent life. And God's like, I know it's going to be messy. I'm sorry. I wish it could be another way, but it's that or nothing.
Yeah.
So I think this hypothesis can explain fine-tuning in terms of God's purposes, but can also explain the suffering in terms of God's limitations. So both sides, traditional atheism, traditional theism, both
almost don't even want to stop him anymore.
I really think this is contagion. So I think where the evidence is pointing.
So here's one other consideration that I'm sure that some people watching this are going to have this concern as well. Some people, the only viable...
All right. So because it's playing the way it's playing, I don't want to put people through this. This is torture for me. So if anything, I think what we might want to do is begin to recap some of the things that he said that made us say, yeah, this is not Christianity. One of the things, I'm going to take him out the studio because that's terrible. I'm not going to put people through that.
Sure.
What he goes on to say, and Tim alluded to this, one of the major problems that he has always had with Christianity and still has with the classical construction of Christianity is substitutionary atonement, penal substitutionary atonement. He says, I just don't understand what a God would get out of killing someone, whoever it is, even if it's a son, killing someone to forgive other people's sin. He said, I could never. And Cameron even tries to talk him into a way to accept it. He says, no, I still cannot get with penal substitutionary atonement. Tim, I'm curious for you, having deconverted, do you now look back at penal substitutionary atonement and say, what the hell was I thinking accepting that? Or do you still see some kind of, no, I get why that kind of a sacrifice would appease a God? Because Philip Goff says, no, I still can't get with that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, where to even start? Blood atonement is crucial to Christian theology. And it's all throughout Scripture, everything, even in the Old Testament. He was, Isaiah was 53, he's pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. You've got the sacrifices of the lambs and the goats for our sins. You've got, John 3:16, John, was it? I forget the verse, but behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. I mean, the Lamb of God, even that verbiage, the Lamb of God, the sacrificial Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Jesus is the final Lamb. His blood is the final blood atonement. That is woven through dozens, maybe probably hundreds of scriptures in the New Testament and in the Old as well. For him to reject that is one of the craziest things. And I know there's other people, he's not novel in that, but it is woven throughout Scripture. But I think the bigger issue is if he's willing to address that and say, penal substitutionary atonement, which is wrapped up in blood atonement, if that doesn't make sense to him, you have to start to say, which particular verses are you willing to ignore to get around that, to say it doesn't make sense? And also implicit in that is penal substitutionary atonement is wrapped up in blood atonement, which means you're getting back to blood magic, which means you're getting back to ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia. You're getting back to mythology. The issue over and over for me and with people like him, and this is where when I look at them, I just kind of cringe because I'm screaming, you're not dealing with the issue. You're not dealing with the issue. The issue is he can't. You can't come to the end. I mean, the end conclusion is what do you believe, right? And the earlier stages are what's true and how do I interpret this? Okay, well, based on the truth and my interpretation, therefore this is true. He needs to not deconstruct where he lands. He needs to deconstruct where it starts. He never deconstructs the source. And I mean, if he's going to talk about this atonement thing, talk about blood magic. Where does blood magic come from? And does blood magic have any relevance to our world? Scapegoating, the idea of a scapegoat, does that have anything to do with reality? They don't really touch on that, and that's the most unfortunate part of this is they're ignoring the big picture. Where does this start? It doesn't even start with Jesus. They're kind of talking about Jesus a lot. Jesus is here to fulfill the Old Testament. We need to get back to the Old Testament because he even says stuff like, I'm here to fulfill the law and the prophets, and he says it in Matthew 5. When you look at that, if he's here to fulfill Yahweh's commands and Yahweh's book and Yahweh's prophecies, right, then you have to say to yourself, well, where did Yahweh come from and what kind of character is he? Number one, we know he's mythology. Number two, we know that he's an absolute horrible tyrant. So like, why would you want to land with Jesus when you know where this whole thing started from, which is garbage and horror? And they don't get to that point. But yeah, if you're going to get to a point of saying, I don't believe in penal substitutionary atonement, you are going to have to be cherry picking on fire which verses you do and don't want anymore. And you're going to have to discount hundreds, thousands of years of theology of the church putting blood sacrifice atonement on blast and weaving it into every part of the fabric. And to suddenly say, well, that's I know that's the core of it for everybody, but I choose a different path. I mean, to me, it's like how much can you gut Christianity before there's not Christianity left? And I think that's why a lot of Christians objected to his interview. But I don't understand why Cameron would put him up as an example of sorts. I mean, it seemed like he was kind of saying, this is a win. This is an example of a different version. Like, you can grapple with these, but still land as one of us. I'm sorry, but again, it's good for our team if there's a team. And again, we're not trying to really be against them because we want to say, to Christians,
the team is humanity.
We're for you. But if you all keep talking, you're going to empty the pews. I mean, it's what you've been doing. You've been talking, you're emptying the pews. So keep talking. The pews will empty some more, because that idea, you're basically ignoring dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of scriptures. So the next question is, well, which other dozens or hundreds of scriptures should I ignore next? Like, what, hell, because I don't think they really talked about hell in this one, if I'm not mistaken. But like, once you get rid of blood atonement and you get rid of hell, the question is, well, what do I need Jesus for? Is he now just an option? I could choose him as a good philosopher, but if I don't really need him, then it's like,
well, what he says is Jesus becomes the way that this God who is all good, he's got good desires, good designs. He just is not powerful enough to do all that he would do. But one of the things that he could do was, in the person of Jesus, and I forget, now I really wish we could play him a little bit more. I don't know if he's fully on board with the deity of Christ, the condescension of God in Christ. But he says, I remember he says, Jesus is the way that this God who couldn't do all he wanted to do, he was trying to find a way to join humanity, or have humanity join him, and Jesus was the way that he could do that. So penal substitutionary atonement, maybe no, not that, but God and man becoming one in Jesus, yeah, I'm there. So that's what he's trying to say. That could be his access card onto the Christian team, is I'm at least doing that. Would you guys let me in with that?
Like Jesus is the intermediary. But I mean, you have to beg the question too, if he's going to admit that God is not as powerful as he needs to be or wants to be, then the biggest carrot in the room is the promise of salvation, eternal salvation. So if God can say to people, I would like to do something nice for you, but I can't. Well, he'd like to stop childhood cancer, but he can't. Or he'd like to stop the hurricane that just came, but he can't. If that's what we're implying, then maybe the next words out of his mouth is, I wanted to save you from hell, but I can't. I wanted to give you heaven, but I can't. Once you diminish God, he's nothing more than basically just another highly advanced alien species out there. It's like, the Klingons might have some really good good tech, it doesn't make them God. It makes them very powerful, but not all powerful. It's like, okay, well, maybe aligning yourself with the Klingons is good or bad. I don't know, but it doesn't ensure your salvation. They're just a lot more powerful than you, but not all powerful. That's what he basically created, an advanced alien civilization that he kind of thinks gives them some kind of peace of mind. But I mean, to me too, he admits over and over and over. I mean, honestly, for those of you that watch it, you'll see it. He admits over and over and over, I'm still kind of searching. I don't know where I'm going to land. And he's like, this very well may be completely wrong. It's like, if it's a question of like, and at one point he shifts the numbers from 30% to like 50-50. It's like, if it's 50-50, I could be completely wrong. I could be completely right. And they just basically try to push forward this idealized sense of, yeah, but if Christianity is true, then you're basically, by being too skeptical, you're rejecting the truth. And it's like, yeah, but by not putting huge claims through a skeptical grid that says you do have to have incredibly good proof for this, if we're going to waste our whole lives on this mythology, they just ignore the whole thing. And like, it's basically like a comfort. It's a comfort blanket. Like I go to bed at night and I think to myself, the world is scary. The world is a big nightmare. I could be hit by a car tomorrow. I could have cancer, whatever. My heart could stop right now. The world is a scary place. What's going to make it feel a little less scary? There's probably a God out there that's somewhat powerful that wants to be one with me. I feel better now. I feel like I'm not alone. Maybe the boogeyman can't get me.
Yeah.
That's what this is about. This is about a comfort blanket, and that's not going to get people very far. Really
that goes back to the psychology you talked about at the beginning, right? There's something psychologically that this does for me, and I'm appealing to it for that alone. I don't need it to do all things. I need it to do these things. Whatever level of the hierarchy I'm stuck on right now, this is what I needed to do. And when I end up at a different level, I'm going to appeal to it for that. In terms of all these other things that, like you talked about, the sacrifice and the blood magic and all that, I don't know about it. I haven't felt those needs. And that's why somebody might I would have disqualified him as a Christian, because one of the felt needs you need to feel before you come to the cross of Christ is you need to feel your need for a savior. You need to feel the weight of your sin. And if you're not showing that you felt the weight of your sin, whatever you're coming to Jesus for, you're coming to him for the wrong reason. And so I would have disqualified him on that alone. But once again, that's me as an evangelical, Christian, thinking about this is what the message is.
I don't think they didn't even talk about sin much or at all, did they? As far as I remember.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. If sin isn't an issue and hell isn't an issue, then this is all just a free-for-all. It really is. And once you tear apart the Bible, and honestly too, just going to the idea of the Bible, he would be a lot better, in my opinion, if he went with the non-canonical Gospels. His version of Christianity is much more highly aligned with, say, the Gospel of Thomas, where like the sayings of Jesus are stripped in many ways of the miraculous claims. They simply emphasize sort of this esoteric wisdom. The Gospel of Peter, it portrays this resurrection narrative that's far removed from the sanitized canonical accounts. If you look at, for example, the Gospel of Mary, it's a text that talks about inner enlightenment. It completely dismisses the need for an external savior. Christian theology would have been so different if those had been in the forefront of the canonical Gospels. He's kind of leaning towards those. He's leaning towards the Gnostic Gospels, and they don't even touch on that.
Yeah,
but that's what he's basically gotten into a Gnostic Christianity, and at that point, again, it's got nothing for us except it's pure cherry picking. His whole interview was like, I'm going to cherry pick what feels right, and I don't necessarily need to defend it. I don't even need to have good odds for it. It just feels good to me, and that's where I'm going to land because I want to. They also didn't address the issue of, just number one, the outsider test for faith was a big one. Like, how do you know that if you feel this need for a deism, like a God out there somewhere, why does that lead you to necessarily to Christianity? You could think that there's some kind of God out there. That doesn't make him Yahweh and Jesus. That could be any number of gods. They never address that issue. But again, once you have a deistic God and nothing else, they're not really addressing the fact that you can't really make strong truth claims. You just can't, because you've said that the word of God is not my highest standard. Therefore, the word of man, like he even puts it, he's like, I can't see that passage isn't legend or mythology. He's the one who's put himself up as the judge. I judge the Bible. I judge the passages. I judge the miracles. I judge the resurrection. I judge everything. Once a man is a judge and not God is the judge and the book is the judge, game's over. Game is over.
So you're basically saying there's no room for skepticism within Christianity. You have to buy into it. You can't hold it tangentially. You can't be skeptical of it. You can't be Thomas, one of the disciples who, until I see, I'm not going to. You can't be Thomas and be a Christian.
I'd have to think on that before I give a firm answer. That's an interesting question. He's obviously claiming. I mean, you can, in a sense, you can do whatever the hell you want. I mean, you can claim to be a whatever you want to be. It's if that's the way he wants to land. If he's a Christian, he's a Christian. If that's the title he likes, then all power to him. I think it sounds to me on the surface like if we had addressed the questions a little bit differently and had gotten a little bit more into his personal background, including his childhood, as well as the evolution of his faith and the lack thereof for a while, and where he's at, like what else is going on in the circles of his life, I would bet that there are some pressures in his life to fall in line, to say that atheism seems like a step too far, a step too cold towards nihilism or something, towards secularism, in a way that maybe he's got some pressures to like, please don't do that. Who knows? Maybe it's family, maybe it's friends, or
well, no, he did say, I mean, it was glitching, but he did say, as he was teaching this course, early in his career, he had to present the arguments for and the arguments against God, and he thought they both had a strong appeal, and he couldn't sleep because this philosophical / theological conundrum, problem of evil and suffering on one hand, fine tuning on the other hand, and his solution so far as far as I've heard, the only pressures for him was, I need to reconcile these two because they both seem like they have strengths to them. And so his reconciling them was this third way, a good God who's just not all powerful. So there may be other stressors for him, but he seemed to be presenting it as, I had to square this circle and this was the only way I could do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think if he was more honest with the terms, he would call himself an agnostic deist, or somewhere in between there. He's an agnostic deist. Most Christians would say he's not a Christian. Probably an earlier version of himself would have said, I'm not a Christian. He's somewhere between agnosticism and deism. What that has to do with Christianity, I don't know, apart from the fact that he grew up in it or exposed to it in some way. But being a deist or being an agnostic shouldn't imply Christianity in any way, shape, or form. And why he respects the Christian text as opposed to other texts, again, they never go into it. They never go into the fact of, well, what text are we even going to start with to talk about God at all or Jesus? They just kind of go from deism, agnosticism to Christianity. Those do not connect. They don't logically connect.
And I think for a lot of people, it's not just the fine tuning; it's the kalam, cosmological argument. Things that begin to exist have a cause. The universe began to exist, and so if you swallow those premises, you're very open to the conclusion of, so then the cause of the universe must be this uncaused being, and that uncaused being must have these attributes, and so you end up at this God. I think for a lot of people, they were never properly skeptical. They were never asking the right questions behind the answers. Like, it's okay to have questions, but one of the things that we don't do often is question the answers. And I think that's what the counter-apologist movement does a great job of doing, is because Christians will tell you, it's okay to have questions. What they won't let you do is question the answers. And so, I think being properly skeptical, being able to look at the claims of the apologist and say, I hear you, but why would I accept that? Like you said, why would I rush right from deism to this particular religion? And why would I rush right from this claim that the universe has a cause to the universe began? Like, why am I assuming that that's what's really going on here, as opposed to asking more pointed questions about the quote unquote beginning of the universe? We don't often do that.
Yeah. And it seems like in another sense, what he's trying to do is he's trying to embrace like a version of Christianity that's just kind of fitting where he's already leaning. Like, he's already said, I land here. I don't have a title for it yet, but I'm going to call it Christianity. Some of you might agree, some of you might not, but I land here. I'm going to slap a label on of Christianity. But I mean, it's like he's admitting, I'm willing to accept Christianity as a title, as a label, despite its possible and even probable, low probability of truth. He's like, he's like, I kind of want it to work in a sense, but not fully, but I kind of want it to work enough. To me, that's not a virtue. Doubt is a virtue. Skepticism is a virtue. And it comes down to this: where do the arguments lead? He's not letting the arguments lead somewhere. He's kind of just saying, I've kind of made my bed, and now I want to put this is where I want to sleep, and I want to put a title on it. When Christianity is that fluid and that dependent, it's like he's the word restructuring comes to mind. He's restructuring his philosophy. It's not like a genuine conversion in the traditional sense. Like he's restructuring. And it's, to me, the only value in it is saying, from our perspective, like, if that makes you comfortable, this is your journey. You don't have to land as an atheist. You don't have to land like us. We're not trying to tell you that it's black and white and you need to be just like us or you're wrong. What we are saying, though, is that it is misleading if you're telling me that good philosophy and good argumentation led you to be a Christian. That you need to be honest about. You need to put your cards on the table. You're not being honest. You did not use good argumentation to get here. You got here in some circuitous route and then slapped a label on it. That's a version of dishonesty to me that's not very helpful. But again, it's helpful to me because someone is looking carefully is going to say red flags, bullshit. This is not, and that's very traditional for what I see on Cameron's YouTube channel.
I don't watch a lot of his channel, so I think I've seen just a few debates that have been on there. I haven't really watched a lot of the content, but I think one of the good things that the counter apologist, the former theist has an advantage because you know what it's like to be gullible. You know what it's like to not ask the right questions, and you know the sting. You know the sting of having been deceived. You know the sting of having believed a lie, and the embarrassment of having preached a lie. That affords you a certain amount of fortitude to not ever end up in that situation again. And so we end up a lot of times being very scientific. I was scientific before I even knew what the scientific method actually was. In my deconversion process, I ended up being very scientific. Here's what the goal of science has been, the project of science has been. One, to find out what's reliable, what can we predict based on what we know. But another good thing that science has been good for, this is almost one of the paramount uses of science, is to rule things out. What can we rule out based on what we know now? We may have 100 hypotheses, but after running this test and this test and this test, we can at least rule that out. We can at least rule this out. We may not still know the final answer, but we can rule some things out. And for those who are offended that somebody would call themselves agnostic or atheist or have this view against the Bible or whatever, it's because we now know enough to rule it out. And so when we see somebody who's searching, nothing against Philip Goff for searching, for wanting answers, but to go to something that we now know enough to rule it out, it's like, that's what I talked about. You're taking us backwards now. You're going back to the Stone Age. You're going back to before we had the things we have now. We know enough to rule these things out. Okay, you got me. I can't tell you what the beginning of it all is. I can't say what the cause is. You got me. But we can rule out Yahweh. We can rule out the Bible. We can rule out these things because of what they say that we now know is not true. So Tim just said you don't have to become like us. But in one sense, I hope you do become like us. And that is having the courage to rule out the things that we now know we can rule out. And then join the enterprise of, okay, well, then if not that, then what? That's all we're doing. That's what part of the human project is. If not that, then what? Yeah,
agreed. And I think one word too that's coming to mind is the idea of coherence. Like when you come up to a worldview that you're going to critique and accept and unaccept, you have to, at some level, have some way of being able to defend it well. Even when we were Christians, you should always have a reason to give an answer for the reason for the hope that's within you. You should be able to search the scriptures to see if these things are so. If you're gonna tout a worldview at all, and I mean, if you're just going to say I'm just a seeker, I don't know what I think, but I'm seeking. But yeah, I go to church sometimes. That's one thing. But if you're going to get on a big platform and kind of suggest that this might be a good path, there needs to be some level of defense and coherence to it. This was a very incoherent worldview where God is sort of, I mean, the idea is there's this finite, limited God who's not omnipotent. I mean, he gets real close, I think, to pantheism, or sort of this idealism. The universe is like part of God, but I'm going to reject the virgin birth, the bodily resurrection. I'm going to reject a whole bunch of miracles. I'm going to say that maybe the resurrection was just like a vision instead of a physical event. And he's really getting to a point where they agree, like even in the interview, like this is heresy to a lot of Christians, but it's not coherent. There's no coherence here, and it's more like they're just throwing darts. It feels like they're throwing darts and hoping something sticks. And at the end of the day, again, I applaud them, because it's a great example, number one, of how Cameron's just doing a showmanship thing. This is not a true apologetics thing. They're not giving good reasons for the hope that's within them. And I've seen that over and over on his stuff when I do occasionally check in. It's just showmanship, and it's doing, in my opinion, it's doing Christianity a disservice. I think his channel is actually helping Christians to deconstruct. So in that sense, I applaud it. There's always going to be somebody that's just going to always applaud and say, anytime somebody's a Christian or anytime we're doing apologetics, I'm going to land on that, my faith is going to get stronger. But I think a lot of people are truly saying, I want to come to this honestly. I don't want to do the party line. I don't care if I land in Christianity or agnosticism or wherever. I want the truth. I want the goddamn truth once and for all, wherever it leads. Yeah. And when they look at something like this and a lot of other similar stories, it's like, this doesn't sound right. And that's the biggest thing. Like, this doesn't sound right. This sounds like cultural Christianity. This sounds like maybe you were already kind of predisposed to go to church, to sing some songs, whatever, to pray a prayer, to kneel. It sounds like you're kind of predisposed to this. And it just feels like a comfortable continuation in some way, or returning to your childhood. There's nothing in that. And in so much of what Cameron presents on his interviews that says these truth claims actually have real meat to them. And again, they did not touch whatsoever on things like, where did the Yahweh character come from? Why are there 4 gospels? And we don't really know where and I know Cameron does a whole bunch of gymnastics with that, but we don't know who wrote them. There originally were like 50 or 60, arguably hundreds of gospels. There's clear evidence that they're copying the Jesus stories from the Greco-Roman mystery cults and the Pantheon, from Homer's Odyssey, over and over and over. They don't touch on a goddamn bit of it. They just say Jesus, as if we all are agreeing that this Jesus character is like this monolithic, like we know who he is. Like nobody knows who he is, because there's hundreds of variations of him and of what he did in the stories, and which one is right, which ones were edited. We don't know the chain of custody of who had the gospels and who changed them. We don't know anything about this stuff. And we do know that a lot of it changed over time based on the politics of the early church fathers and the theology as it evolved with the church councils. Yeah, we know this stuff evolved. They don't touch on anything. They're just kind of like, however the gospels got to us in this final form hundreds of years later, let's go with that. And even there, they're not really accepting. They're just like dissecting that. It's like, no, you need to go backwards and dissect where the whole thing came from before you start to land on what you're gonna believe. And I think most people, if they're really honest, if they go back a few more steps, they're like, this thing looks like it's just human. It doesn't look divine at all. It looks like humans, and it looks evolved. And at that point, why would you let dead men from 2,000 years ago who made up these stories, why would you let them dictate your spirituality? Why not make up your own? I mean, if you're gonna cherry pick, make up your own spirituality. Don't go to men 2,000 years ago. Your own is probably arguably a lot better.
Somebody in the chat, I'm not sure if they're trolling or what, but somebody in the chat made the comment, Christianity is growing, and deconversion, something like that, is ebbing away. If you look at where Christianity is growing in the world, it's growing in places where the education levels are not high, technology is not great, superstition is very high. Christianity is growing in those places. If you look at where education levels are high, where technology is strong, Christianity is not growing. Christianity is shrinking, especially in the West. So let's not do that. We can pull up Pew Foundation surveys and talk about how unchristian the West is becoming. I typically don't read chats if you're not super chatting, but I just want you to understand this is not a place to come to spew those kind of talking points. But yeah, I'm gonna let that rock out. If you're not subscribed to the Patreon, we got $5 level subscribers on the Patreon. We got $10 level subscribers on the Patreon. Would appreciate. The link is on the screen and in the chat. Crystal posted the link. Please hit up the Patreon. We're gonna do some great things here on this channel in the near future. If you're not subscribed to Harmonic Atheist Tim's channel, you got interview after interview of him just helping people get their stories about why they are no longer Christians. And then you now have Tim adding very, very great, I would say, pastoral just segments of him sharing his heart about what needs to happen in our world and in our thinking and in our communities. So yes, please go subscribe to Tim's channel. I'm going to post the link under this video, but Crystal already put it in the chat for those of you who are in the live chat. Tim, thanks so much for joining. Any last words, anything you want to share about what's coming up on your channel or anything?
Well, you're just going to say one quick thing about the atheism declining, whatever. I think that if I'm not mistaken, that some of those projections are that Islam is actually rising faster than Christianity, and that right now Christianity I think is the highest, but I think by they estimate by 2050 that it's going to be basically 50-50 or equal of Muslims equals Christians. So if we're going to base the truth claims based on how fast it's growing, you're going to have to deal with Islam really fast. You're going to have to say, okay, well, Islam's growing really fast now. So therefore, is that the true one? The growth of something is not the test of whether it's true. It's whether they're, number one, they're good at indoctrinating and intimidating people. Number two, if they're breeding as fast as they can, so that they're, if you have a family of Muslims and they end up having 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, and then each one of those has 4, 5, 6 kids, you're going to have population growth and religion growth by default. If you're in a country where they're going to say you believe, or we will literally put you in prison or kill you, you're going to have a lot of people saying they're Muslims, and within a generation or two, it's just part of the culture. It's you have to believe. But to say that the atheism is not growing as fast as Christianity, or it's whatever, that's not the test. And the test is always, is this religion true? Where did it come from? Is it truth? And I really encourage people, please think better thoughts about this. Think better thoughts. Think not just about the thoughts, but think about your criteria for those thoughts. What is the filter that makes something true? What is, raise that bar. I'm not saying I've got some magic way that I do it, but just raise the bar and say, I'm not going to believe anything unless I'm sure where it came from, how it evolved, and whether these truth claims, and number one, where do they come from? And number two, can you try to falsify them? Try your best to falsify the claims.
There you go.
And but anyway, going back to your question, my channel, I'm hoping it can grow, as fast as possible. I'm doing a lot of things that just I think are going to eventually help a lot of people. My goal in many ways is to get out of the way, because I don't want it to be the Tim show, of course, even though I'm hosting it. I want it to be about people, of course, for the interviews and for the monologues and live streams like that. I want it to be about the topics, and I want people to feel like they're going away not thinking, oh, Tim came up with some clever way of saying some things, but to say Tim brought something to our attention, and this was a good thing to bring to our attention. For example, the psychology behind the Christian manipulation and propaganda, and abuse. But to say we're going to take this and say Tim put some words to what we were all already thinking, but now we're all collectively going to take it even higher to the next level. And that's why I love, when I get comments, people will comment on something in the live stream and I'll be like, you just took what I said and thought, and you added something to it. You took it to a level I wasn't thinking. You made my thoughts better. And I think collectively, it's like we are slowly helping each other get better and better at thinking, and critical thinkers. And I do hope very much that this becomes, not as much about me, although I want to be obviously a linchpin for the community, but I want us to feel like we're collectively having better and better thoughts, to the point that when people start to listen to us, we're all on board with where mythology came from, and we're all on board with the psychology of belief, and we're all on board with just rationality and being more critical and skeptical. You get enough of the people saying that stuff and changing our filters and new people coming in and saying, what are you all talking about? Oh, that's interesting. I never heard that. Christianity didn't teach me that or that or that. We begin to collectively think better thoughts. Our filters collectively get better. And eventually, I think it's inevitable that more and more people are just going to say Christianity, there's just no way that worldview is accurate. There's just no way. And also, I think they're going to get to a point where they're going to say it's a weird religion with the genital mutilation and the blood magic and the whole pretending to eat a dead man's body and drink his flesh, drink his blood and eat his flesh. But they're also going to say like this whole idea of a God, this God character, this Yahweh character, he is really a psychopath. And they're going to see it for the first time, like a God who wants to forgive you, but he can't without blood and lots and lots of it. And he the best plan he came up with was to kill his own son. And like you and I can forgive if I offend you, you can just say, Tim, I forgive you. Case closed. He can't just say that. Like I thought he makes up the rules. Yeah. And eventually you get to a point where you're like, between the mythology and the psychopathic nature of Yahweh and all these other things, we eventually lift ourselves up. And as people come in, there's be like, why didn't I see that before? But once you see it, as we all keep saying, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's why we're going to help people escape. And I put 1,000 people in the kingdom. I'm going to take 100,000 back out.
That's what's up. Economancer, I just want to say, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming. And thank you for holding down the fort that you believe needs to be held down in a chat full of skeptics. I did put 2 links in the chat. One is about a group of people called religious nuns, not N-U-N nuns, N-O-N-E-S. These are people who are religious, non-affiliate from a Pew Foundation research that was done. And then another link I put in is about the decline of Christianity in the United States. So before we close the live chat, Economancer, if you can maybe just click on those links real quick and maybe educate yourself on some of that. I know you said, somebody told you that Christianity was growing in the States, but just click on those links, check it on your own, and hopefully, you'll come back and we can have some more conversations or whatever. Tim, thank you, bro. Let's do something else in the near future. Love you, man. And
the honor's all mine.
Yep, all good. Thank you. We'll connect. All right, everybody, have a great day. We'll see you on the next one. Peace. I'm gonna leave the chat up for a minute so that anybody who wants to go grab those links can go grab those links. I'm closing this out in a few seconds, so make sure you go copy and paste them, save them in your favorites or something like that. All right. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Grab you a link. All right. All right, y'all. We out. Peace.
Thanks, everybody.